What is up, everybody? I'm NoLucksGiven here with your afternoon snap, and today we're going to be discussing why I'm going to be getting Arishem, the best cards to play with it, and I'll be sharing my day one deck list. The first reason to grab Arishem is it is the prime celestial that created the first sun and brought light into the universe. Okay, that's kind of a joke, but my real first answer is going to seem like more of a joke, and that's because I talked about this in my April Fool's video this year, where I talked about my love for District X, which was very much not a joke. It was very much serious, just thought it was a funny topic to talk about for that day. District X is a great location in Marvel Snap, and I think it's the closest thing we have to a limited mode in the game. Check out that video if you want some more information on exactly what I'm talking about here, as well as some really fun District X gameplay. But basically the idea is that District X tests you by making you play with cards that you wouldn't otherwise normally play with. And with that, just adds a lot of fun randomness. That's all we're getting at here. Arishem, a lot of people aren't gonna like the RNG. They're gonna do thumbs down to Arishem just for the RNG. However, I think that when you are tested, when you get those low rolls, when you get really weird cards, I'll give a great example of that. I think I was one of the first players to realize Sentry could be a really good card. Now, this was before Annihilus was even released, mind you, so maybe I was wrong. However, I would get Sentry in District X games, and it could allow you to do some really cool stuff. So I started experimenting with the card just in normal deck lists, because there were locations that it really worked with, like Mojo World, or you could fill the third location, or fill it up with Professor X to mitigate Sentry's drawback. And I've said this in a number of different contexts, but the way that you really test intelligence, ingeniosity in the Gambit game, for instance, is by adapting to new information that you haven't seen before. And I think that is what is really fun about District X and Arishem, is they just introduce so many new scenarios that you have to think about, which really keeps Marvel Snap fresh and exciting. Arishem doesn't just get you to play with new things that you otherwise wouldn't, it also allows you to play with new things that you otherwise couldn't. As a free-to-play player in Marvel Snap, I think Arishem is going to be really cool because it will give me more opportunities to play with brand new cards. You don't have to buy every card as soon as it releases into Marvel Snap, as long as you buy Arishem. And of course, there are other ways to generate cards. If you really wanted to play with a new 6-cost card, you could put Valentina in your deck. If you really wanted to play with a new 5-cost card, you could put Agent Coulson in your deck until you drew it. However, with Arishem, you're just going to get to see a bunch of cards, and with that, you'll have some chances to occasionally run into whatever new releases also hit Marvel Snap. So, for just 4 Spotlight keys or 6,000 tokens, you are effectively buying every card in Marvel Snap. Obviously, it's not quite that simple, but I think that's a pretty cool selling point. And the last thing that I wanted to bring up before we get into the meat and potatoes of this video is that Arishem might actually just be good. I personally would be buying Arishem even if it was a 9-10 that was just like uncastable and didn't give you that extra energy at the start of the game. I would just be playing it just for the ability to shuffle 12 random cards into my deck, because I think that that's fun. And I think that there's definitely something to be said for fun in Marvel Snap. That's mostly those first 2 points that I've brought up so far in this video. However, point number 3 here, that extra energy, Arishem might actually be good. Now, I don't want to get hyperbolic with this. I don't think that you should be purchasing Arishem off the idea that it's going to allow you to win the next tournament that's coming up in Marvel Snap. But it might be able to get you to Infinite. I'm going to play Arishem to Infinite exclusively next season. And I'll probably try to grab some Conquest borders with it when the Infinity Conquest opens up with Arishem's release tomorrow. So yeah, I think that this card could actually be good. +1 energy is really, really fantastic. And with that, what are the cards that I think Arishem will be best with? Let's take a look. The first card that I think we have to talk about for inclusion in Arishem decks is Loki, the God of Chaos. And Arishem is bringing a lot of chaos with the random cards that it shuffles into your deck as well. However, Loki in Marvel Snap is actually more an agent of unchaos, an un-RNG manipulator in a way, because Loki is going to be able to take those true clunkers that Arishem gives you and exchange them, transform them into cards from your opponent's starting deck instead. Loki is a fantastic card in its own right, but it's really fantastic, I have found, in decks that have some cards that can potentially be bad, and Arishem has a bunch of cards in its deck that can potentially be bad, so using Loki as a means to potentially shuffle those bad cards away is a pretty good element. And I'm not saying you should always try to undermine everything that I said in my first 2 points at the start of the video. However, there are some clunkers. There's no way around that. There's going to be cards that you just can't really do anything with and don't want to play, and for those cards, there's Loki. Agent Coulson shouldn't come as a surprise to Loki enjoyers. It's really strong in Loki lists because it can give you random cards that you can potentially shuffle away with Loki. However, in this deck, with the extra energy that Arishem gives you, I think those random 4 and 5 cost cards have a much higher chance of actually getting played. And to that point, I think we can even go a little bit further. I'm not including Snowguard in this deck, even though I think that Snowguard is typically one of the best cards in a Loki list. I'm going bigger. I am going for Nick Fury. Recently buffed, I have been eyeing up Nick Fury since the beginning of the season, since Arishem was actually revealed, because I think that there's a lot that you can do with Nick Fury with just that 1 extra energy. First off, just in a normal game, Nick Fury is only going to be able to play one of the cards that you're only going to be able to play one of the cards that you get from Nick Fury. However, in an Arishem game, you have a very real chance to just cast 2 of those 6 cost cards without even doing any further work. And randomness kind of begets more randomness. I think that there's some inclination to just play Loki and try to make all of that randomness go away. However, as Arishem decks evolve in the future, and I do think that I don't have all of the tech for you right now, I think that there's going to be some desire to play certain cards that reward you for other random cards that you get. And I think like a great example of that is Odin. I'm not playing Odin in my deck list, but if you get some cards that synergize with Odin out of Arishem, and then you get an Odin out of Nick Fury, you'll be pretty happy that the stars align in that way. And I think that Nick Fury gives you a lot of potential to pick up some big payoff cards like Odin and Onslaught and others, while also just increasing your options. And when you are playing with RNG, just having more options actually just benefits you, because you might have some clunkers. Like I was bringing up in the Loki section, there might be some cards that you don't want to play. However, the more cracks at the apple you have, the more random cards you see, the more chances are that that random card, that next random card, whatever it is, the 13th, 14th, or 15th one that Nick Fury gives you, is going to be the one that is relevant for the specific game that you're playing. Say we take a location that adds a random card to your hand, like the Hub, which just adds a random card to each player's hand. The chances that that card is relevant for you for this game is pretty low. If it was a card that was good for your deck, you would have put it in your deck, right? Well, why is the Hub potentially more relevant than it just seems like on the outset? Well, there is the chance that you could get a tech card that could interact with your opponent, but there's also the chance that you could get a card that interacts favorably with one of the game's other 2 locations. And that kind of feeds into my example, that having more RNG can kind of help you deal with the other RNG that happens in Marvel Snap. Similarly, if something like Triskelion fills your hand with a bunch of cards, sure, Triskelion can be kind of a drawback in that it denies you a draw from your deck. However, seeing a bunch of cards increases the chances that 1 or 2 of those cards might be relevant for this individual game. So all of that is just to say, Nick Fury, which gives you some random cards, and Agent Coulson, also giving you random cards, both go along with the game plan that Arishem is already trying to go for, because those random cards that you get from Agent Coulson and Nick Fury might go really well with some of the random cards that Arishem gives you. I also think that it's just really important to note that a huge reason that you're playing both of these cards is the innate power that they have. This is not just a text box. It is not just an ability. It's also 4 power on the board, and Nick Fury is now 6 power on the board, which is a very real number. Now, in addition to these, I think one of the next best Loki cards that you can play is going to be Quinjet, which will reduce the cost of anything that didn't start in your deck, which includes all of the cards that Arishem gives you. I think that you don't want to play too many 1-cost cards in your Arishem deck, because the extra energy from Arishem, you'll want to make sure that you have powerful cards in all of the spaces of your locations to make sure you're getting the most out of that energy. However, Quinjet further discounting half of the cards from your deck, I think is pretty dang good. And with the synergies with the cards that I think we already want to play in Agent Coulson, Nick Fury, and Loki, I do think we're going to want access to Quinjet as well. On the topic of extra energy, that's the next type of card that I want to cover. And I think the first thing that you think of is, let's just play some big cards in your deck. Let's play Doctor Doom. I think that Doctor Doom is potentially pretty good in Arishem. However, there are other cards that I think maybe aren't the first things that you think of. Doctor Doom, I think, is a pretty straightforward one. Everybody already knows Doctor Doom is a good card, but there are some cards that are actually uniquely good in Arishem because you have that extra energy. And the main card that I want to talk about here is Crystal. Each player drawing a card potentially helps your opponent, right? Because they're going to get a real card from their real deck. However, I think you're just going to have the extra energy to fit Crystal in on your curve. And again, we're really looking for the fact that Crystal does put 3 power on the board. That's not going to be relevant power against all decks in all locations, but I do think that Crystal is at least worth considering in Arishem. You get to play it on turn 2, and it draws you another card, which gives you another option. And specifically also, drawing your cards earlier on in the game will give you more information with how to make use of your random cards and make more informed decisions on the RNG that you have. One card that's a little bit cheeky in a similar vein, I'm going to get back to Wave in just a moment, but Adam Warlock I wanted to touch on next because this is a very similar thing to Crystal, and I think Adam Warlock might be good, but I'm going back and forth on it. It is still a little bit expensive for not that much power. However, you do get to play it on turn 4, and that could be enough to just make Adam Warlock good. Adam Warlock might be good, especially if you are going like full ramp into Arishem and playing some of those cards. I played full ramp the other day on my Saturday video. I put out a video for the limited battle, what was that called? Limited, I'm not sure. Limiting Factors, I believe it was called, which was a Discord battle. And I played ramp in that. So if you want to play some more ramp cards, Corvus, Electro, you could be looking at a turn 3 Adam Warlock, which will definitely allow you to draw some cards. And coming out a turn earlier or 2 turns earlier, if you are also ramping with Wave or Electro or anything else, could be really good. I'm not sure that you want to dedicate other slots in your deck to additional ramp. I'm still a little bit out on that. However, if you are going to be playing a bunch of cards like Dr. Doom, then playing more ramp makes sense. And if you're playing more ramp, playing Adam Warlock does kind of make sense, because the earlier you get this card out, the harder it is going to be for your opponent to contest it. They also don't know where you're going to play it on that individual turn, so assuming they don't play to the exact same location as you, you should be getting at least 1 card draw out of this, but potentially even more, and Adam Warlock definitely has the potential to be really good. One card that is really cheeky, and I want to give shout outs to Willow CCG for their thread on Arishem on Twitter. They brought up that if you play a Wave on turn 2, then when Wave reduced things to only cost 4, only you will have 4 energy on turn 3, which I think is a really, really cheeky effect, and at the very least worth mentioning if you want to go down that Arishem ramp strategy. I think that this is really cool, but I think it might be a little cute for what you're actually getting. You're only getting that asymmetrical Wave effect if you can draw and play Wave on turn 2, which is going to be much harder to do in a deck that is double the size with Arishem. And Wave doesn't give you anything spectacular in the end game either, unless you pair it alongside Magic or Corvus or potentially Psylocke, so that way on the 6th turn of the game or the final turn of the game, you have an additional energy, 8, so that way you could play 2 4-cost cards. The other thing that I did want to bring up in this section on the topic of big expensive things is Blob. Blob is going to be really important in Arishem decks for a reason that I am about to bring up, but Blob also has a bunch of food in Arishem because you get to eat up all of those bonus cards that Arishem gives you, so Blob should steadily be a 15+ power card and definitely worth playing, but more than Blob is like definitely worth playing because it will be good, I think that Blob will actually be necessary. This is the potential bane of Arishem decks right here, Darkhawk, which hasn't been seeing that much play recently. It does see occasional play. It's going to see a lot of play this week. And in fact, if you are playing Arishem this week, you also probably just want to throw a Darkhawk in your deck for other people that might be playing Arishem. Now, when the hype has worn off of Arishem being a new card, I think Darkhawk stocks are going to go down as well. However, right now, it's hard to ignore +2 power for each of those 12 additional cards starting in your opponent's deck. Darkhawk is easily a 530, which is why Blob is so important, because Blob is going to eat those cards and shrink opposing Darkhawks, and without it, Darkhawk is just like a free win in at least one location, but if they go Darkhawk plus Mystique, then you are really asking for trouble. That's why I think you're going to want to commit additional slots in your deck to dealing with Darkhawk, again, at least this first week, but cards like Shang-Chi and Rogue are never bad to have on hand, and Darkhawk is just such an awkward card against you that you want to make sure you're answering that. Again, I could see just throwing Darkhawk in the deck yourself, so that could be an interesting card to fill out the list. Of course, this slot is going to be reserved for Arishem itself. I put Legion in the list initially because I thought that would also be cool interaction, and it's a little bit more on the expensive side, but that additional energy from Arishem allows you to play a little bit spicier, expensive cards, that I think is pretty cool. Rogue could also be Enchantress, fueled out by the additional energy. I was basically thinking, and honestly, Doctor Doom, I could see that even just becoming like Gamora or something, or even Arrow. It's just a bunch of power in one location. Maybe Gilgamesh, though we don't really have any ways to pump things up in this deck, so probably not Gilgamesh. I'm just thinking out loud here, just spitballing. One thing that is a little bit of an awkward drawback with 6-cost cards is that you can't really play a 6-cost card plus something else on the final turn, whereas a 5-cost card, which is really just Darkhawk in this list, does still allow you to play 2-cost cards, and there's some strong 2-cost cards that you might want to play alongside Darkhawk on the final turn. I do think you do want to skew the curve of this deck a little bit higher, and I could honestly see just cutting Crystal for another 5-cost card. I think that's where another aspect of the evolution of Arishem is going to come into play as we learn what energy cost do you want of the deck that you are putting in that will complement the deck that Arishem gives you. There's obviously a lot of other funky stuff going on here with Loki, Agent Coulson, and Nick Fury also giving you expensive cards is kind of the reason this curve is like a little bit lower as well. So we are definitely leaning on the random card generation here, but I think that this is a fair place to start. I think that there are some other cards that I potentially haven't mentioned. There's one other thing that I kind of touched on with Wave. You can see Wave isn't in this list, that I think Willow again put very well, and I think a great example of a card that some people might actually think is good in Arishem, but is actually kind of terrible potentially, is going to be Nico. Now, Nico is better the earlier on that you draw it in the game, and again, it's a lot of randomness. The demon, turning something into a demon could be cool, turning something bad into 2 cards could be really cool, especially because you're going to want the card draw to actually see the important cards in your list. However, the earlier that you draw Nico, the better it is, because then you'll see a larger variety of spells, and because of that, in an Arishem deck, I don't think it's actually something that you want. So, not going to personally be playing Nico, but there's definitely probably some other stuff that I've missed in here, right? So let me know what cards you think are going to be good in Arishem. I'm definitely going to be playing it a ton, so while I won't have like an update video to this necessarily, I will definitely have some Arishem content coming out soon on the channel, so make sure you subscribe if you have not already for that, and if you subscribe and leave a comment on any of my videos this season, you are entered into a giveaway to win premium mystery variants, credits, and gold. So do that, subscribe, I'll see you soon. Thank you guys very much for watching. I'm NoLucksGiven. Peace.